That's so crazy. No, they told me like how we got proposed to. Where?
No, actually, I proposed to I got the review family. Review to Carmel, like I'm gonna be so sad. What?
Did you like expected it all? Yeah.
It was a good family. I thought he was going to have both of our families there.
Alright, good morning everyone.
You scared me.
Good morning Jason. A couple real quick announcements before we get started this morning. So, probably told you, but we're not doing group on Wednesday night because of VBS. And I am not talking specifically to the middle school boys when I say this, but no horseplay in this room today. Oh, sorry, my no reason at all. There is a reason we have hid the basketballs and we put up a ping pong table. So please, no horseplay in here.
In fact, this room's gonna be locked after this service. I mean, for real.
Go play in trap. No, I'm joking. No, don't. No. That's on video. Great. But yeah, they put a lot of work into this yesterday, so let's just try not to break anything. All right. So today we're going to talk about the evidence for Christianity. We had several questions about that, and so it's one of my favorite subjects. So I definitely volunteered for that one. I'm taking a different path from it. A couple weeks ago, Pastor Miles had similar questions, and he talked about how the apostles, pre and post resurrection, their actions, the way they talked, the way they lived, and so I'm going to take a different angle from it, and I'm going to give you guys all my sources up front because most of what is going to be in today's message did not come out of the Bible, because we are looking at it from a secular, historical evidence. People will often say, can you give me scientific proof that God existed? And I think that's not fair to ask for, because you don't ask for scientific proof in the court of law. You don't ask for scientific proof for everything. So to say that's the only way to prove God existed or didn't exist is a false course of action. So the way we're going to look at it today is kind of from a procedural law, investigative journalist. When you see my sources, you'll understand. We're looking at the evidence. We're looking at eyewitness evidence. We're looking at who the apostles were. We're looking at what kind of archaeological evidence there is. And so, again, kind of a different route, but hopefully you guys will see why I chose to take that route. So I'm going to open us up in prayer, and then we'll get started. Father, thank you for this opportunity for me to be up here and to just share this message, and I hope that this message just honors you, Lord, and it's you that speaks through me, and just ask that as we gather here today, as we go into our week knowing a lot of these kids that are volunteering with VBS, that you continue to put our focus solely on you, and as these questions come up, you continue to remind us to go back to you and to trust in you and look to you, Lord. And we pray that as we go through today, everybody just has a happy, healthy day, and that everybody's excited about the message. In Jesus' name. All right. So outside sources. Again, I got kind of excited with this message, so I have a big bookshelf, and I walked downstairs with probably a stack of foot tall of different books. The main sources I used Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh and Sean McDowell. Sean McDowell, he's an apologetics professor at Biola. It's a Christian college or Christian university in LA, and his father is one of the leading names in apologetics over the last about 40 or 50 years. They've written several books on the subject. I'd be more than happy to recommend any of their books. And Sean McDowell's probably, outside of our pastors here, one of my leading, if I have questions, I go to his podcast, his books. And I actually took one of his classes at Biola. The next one, Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace. He was a cold case homicide detective, and he applied the technique he learned in that job to researching Christianity. Then there's Case for Christianity by Lee Strobel. He was an investigative journalist that researched the resurrection through an investigative journalist's viewpoint. And what I want to point out about Wallace and Strobel is they were both atheists when they started their investigations. They both set out to debunk Christianity. Strobel had a he knew if he could debunk the resurrection, if he could prove that it didn't happen, that Christianity would fail. Both of them very strong Christians now. Man, Myth, Messiah by Rice Brooks. Again, he looked at it from a historical standpoint, from using outside sources. Christian Truth and Its Defense by Dave Bishop. This is actually a friend of mine who is a retired Marine, and a retired Escondido police officer that did 20 years on the SWAT team. He's kind of a hard dude. If you ever met the guy, you'd be like, wow, he's rough around the edges. And he wrote this book for Marines. So basically it was an evidence book again. And then I used the Rose Book of Bible Charts, Maps, and Timelines. The 4 questions we're going to look at today. What is the archaeological and historical evidence for the Bible being true? How do we know Jesus rose from the dead despite what atheists say? What do Buddhists and others say as to why Christianity is wrong? And what is the defense for Christianity being the only true religion? So today we're looking at the evidence that supports our faith. As I was writing this, I thought about it and I was like, man, I really want to come back later in the summer and do another message on the attacks our faith receives from other religions and atheists. What they say about our faith and what the Bible has to say in response to that. And what history has to say in response to that. But that's a whole nother message. When we're talking about evidence supporting our faith, I will be talking heavily on the resurrection. I'll say it again later. Our faith fails, or what? Man, I gotta get to what Paul says. Rises and falls. There you go. If Christ hasn't been raised, and again I'll read this later. If Christ hasn't been raised, then our faith is in vain. It all falls apart at the resurrection. Okay, so I will be talking heavily on the resurrection throughout this. So the first question we're going to talk about is, what is the archaeological and historical evidence for the Bible being true? Now I do want to set a basis on this. Jesus existed. Skeptics, atheists, people who don't believe in God all agree Jesus existed. There is so much evidence for his existence that it's not even argued anymore. Nowadays, if you hear somebody that says, oh, Jesus never existed, it's typically somebody that's saying that out of spite, and they have a hate or a disdain in their heart. And so skeptics and atheists that have done any sort of basic research will all agree that he did exist, so we're going to go on that basis. But the problem is, we don't have eyewitnesses. They didn't have TikTok, Instagram Reels, whatever else you guys use these days. We don't have all of that to show us that he lived, died on the cross, and was resurrected 3 days later. So we have to approach this in a historical, investigative way. One of the ways we do that is what's called a bibliographical test of verification. All right. There's two parts to the test. The first is the time between the events and the time of the writing and the earliest manuscript that we have. Okay, so back then, 2,000 years ago and longer, everything was oral tradition. They told stories, and they had scribes that would sit there and write exactly what was being said. And that was their job. Their job was to write down exactly what is going on. And so we have to look at when it happened, when it was written about, and what's the earliest manuscript we have. The second way is the number of copies still in existence. Or not second way, but the second part of the test is the number of copies still in existence. So we have some historical writings. Pliny the Younger, okay, and these three I'm going to talk about are all historians. Pliny the Younger, he's from late 1st century into 2nd century, so when a lot of our New Testament was written. The earliest copy we have is from 850 AD. There's 7 copies in existence. Now, when I say 7 copies, I'm talking about 7 pieces, or it's not 7 full copies. It's pieces and parts of the manuscript itself. Let me see if I Thucydides. I think I said that one right. 400 BC time frame. His earliest copy was 900 AD. There's 8 copies in existence. Herodotus, they had some killer names back then. 425 to 480 BC. Earliest copy is 900 AD. And there's 8 copies in existence. Now, these are all individuals that wrote historical documents that historians will look at and say, that is the truth of the time. That is what happened. We know for a fact that what they wrote was true. So let's talk about the New Testament now. It was written in 1st, 2nd century AD. The earliest copy in existence is dated back to 125 AD. The Codex Sinaiticus was the first whole copy of the New Testament, and that's from the 4th century. How many copies do you think, or how many manuscripts, pieces of manuscript do you think we have for the New Testament?
Good amount.
Good amount.
Yeah.
Give me a number.
I think Garrett just said this the other day.
Go again.
Y'all didn't remember.
1,000?
Anyone? Do you know the answer? 8? So right now they're saying between 24,000 and 25,000. Early manuscript copies.
I mean, I was close.
11 of them being from the 2nd century. Okay? Homer's Iliad is second to the New Testament with historical copies at a whopping 1,757. So we have 24,000 copies, all right? And I think if Garrett said 8,000, he's probably referencing the ones that are written in Greek. That many manuscripts, and people will still sit there and say this is not a historical document, that the Gospels and Acts are not historical biographies. All right, they're not historical biographies. So at that point, do you think the skeptics are right, or do you think they are saying it's not a historical biography because they just don't want it to be right because it's about Jesus and it's telling us Jesus is God? All right, cool. So what you're dealing with here is people that don't want it to be true. All right. I look at that. I look at those numbers, and if you're telling me that Pliny the Younger and Thucydides and Herodotus are all accurate representations of their time frame, then why wouldn't the New Testament be considered the same? So we say, I'll say that verifies it. But why should we consider the Gospels and Acts as historical biographies? And why should we consider them accurate? Especially within the four Gospels, there are contradictions of timelines and events. Anybody know why there's going to be contradictions of timelines and events within the four Gospels?
This is written by 4 different dudes.
It's written by 4 different people. You have 4 different people in a room that see the same thing. They all see it from a different angle, and they all have a different viewpoint. They've all come from a different life, and so they're looking for different things. Wallace says it in his book. Any detective will tell you that if you have 4 people that saw the same thing and tell the exact same story, somebody's lying. Or they got their story straight before they wrote it. If you have 4 different variations telling the same story, because all 4 Gospels tell the same story, they just tell it from different angles. They tell it to different people groups. So you have Mark, he was talking to the Roman Christians. Matthew was talking to Jewish readers. Luke was talking to Gentiles. John was talking to everyone. So Matthew went more in depth he referenced the Old Testament more. Because if Mark would have referenced the Old Testament to the Roman Christians, they would have been lost. So, I didn't know if you were sneezing. I was getting ready to give you a...
And then I got embarrassed.
Alright, so you have those contradictions because they're looking at different things, or they see different things. Who were the writers of the Gospels, though? So you have Mark, he was an early church historian, Eusebius, thank you, stated that Mark was Peter's interpreter who wrote down everything Peter remembered about Jesus' sayings and actions. He was also the cousin of Barnabas and accompanied Paul throughout parts of his ministry. So he was within the apostles' community. Matthew and John, both Gospels, have been attributed to the disciples of Christ. Luke and Acts, Luke was a traveling companion of Paul with direct, intimate knowledge of the apostles. So these are all people that are they are apostles, or they directly related to or in the same circles as the apostles. The Council of Carthage in 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries looked at all these writings. So the writings we have in the Bible, the 66 books we have, aren't the only things that were being considered for canon, what's called canon, right? Council of Carthage sat down and looked at this, and one of the things they looked at was this person an apostle? Because they viewed apostles as having the authority and speaking on behalf of Christ. So were they an apostle, or were they directly like one generation from the apostle? Meaning they hung out with them, they knew them, they were in the same crowds. The other things they looked at was a book written by a prophet of God. Was a book confirmed by acts of God? Did its message tell the truth about God? Did it come with the power of God? And was it accepted by the people of God? And so they took all this stuff over 3 centuries, and they all these writings, and we know for a fact there was a 2 Corinthians or a 3rd Corinthians letter because it's referenced within 1st and 2nd Corinthians, but we don't have it. When you look at what we do have, it was all written by apostles, people directly related to, or not, I say related, but within the same community group as the apostles. One book was Jesus' brother. And so the people knew Christ, or they were one generation away from the apostles. what about archaeological findings to support the Bible? So there's the Tel Dan inscription of House of David, dates back to 7th to 9th century BC. It was found, I believe, in the 90s, and it is a stone tablet that simply says House of David. That's what they were able to decipher off of it. The Ketef Hinnom scrolls, they were found in a burial cave with metal scrolls. It took, and reading this, it blew my mind. It took 3 years to unravel this scroll, just so they could see that what was inscribed on it was from number 6. Okay? Dated to the late 7th century BC. There's a Moabite stone that references a battle from 2 Kings 3. It was written by the opposing king, King Mesha. Interestingly enough, he had a different take on the battle, and one argument against or for that is the reason Egyptian history you don't see things about Moses and the Exodus is because Egyptians or other kings didn't write about their failures. The Israelites in the Old Testament was one of the only people group that ever wrote their failures of being defeated or having kings conquering them. No other people group from that time frame did it. And so that answers that. And then Dead Sea Scrolls, some of the oldest texts of the Old Testament, an entire Isaiah text was found. And so there's ample, those are some very quick ones. There's ample evidence. There's archaeological findings. They've dug up entire cities that they can look at and be like, okay, this is what the Bible is referencing. And so there's evidence all over the place to support the Bible. And again, this is all outside the Bible. This is all stuff we see in the world. So moving on to the second question, how do we know Jesus rose from the dead despite what atheists say? So again, I mentioned this earlier. Pastor Miles answered this a couple weeks ago. He mentioned how literally right before Jesus was crucified, Peter denied him 3 times. Peter's always the one I like to pick on because he was, front and center on that. You're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And he denied Jesus 3 times. And then immediately following that, as soon as you get into Acts, Peter is standing up and telling people, you are the ones that crucified him. He's going into the courts when he gets arrested, and he is standing firm in his faith. They get beaten, and he walks out and starts preaching the gospel again. And so, I think that's the biggest tell-all. I think that one it's probably one of my favorite ones to go to. But we're, again, going to go to some different sources, or some different avenues on that. I'm going to bring up 1 Corinthians 15:14 again. If Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and your faith is in vain. If Jesus wasn't executed, and if he didn't come back from the dead 3 days later, then our faith is in vain. So, that's what our faith stands on. We're going to start with a few pieces that are widely accepted. Jesus was crucified. The tomb was found empty by his followers. And Saul of Tarsus, one of his main persecutors, became a believer, or one of the church's main persecutors, became a believer and wrote a large portion of the New Testament. So one thing I'm going to hone in on is the fact that it was the female followers who were the ones that found the empty tomb, the first ones to see Jesus after his resurrection. So why is this interesting? No. Why is it interesting that the female followers were the ones that found the empty tomb and the first ones to see it? Wow, you guys are quiet today. Usually second services. Micah's got something. All right, so in that time, a female was not considered a reliable witness.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
A female females did not have voices. Okay? And so when you have his females being the first ones to see the empty tomb, and the first ones to see Jesus, that in typical Jesus fashion, that's extremely counterculture. That is not what is normal. If you're going to lie about that, you are not going to have the least, I'm not saying they're least reliable on the time Solace. You are not going to have the least reliable witnesses be your witness. If they were to take that to a court in that time and said, these women saw the empty tomb and saw Jesus after he was supposed to be dead, the court would have said they're not allowed to talk in here. And so that, to me, speaks volumes on they weren't trying to do a cover-up. If they were trying to cover it up, they would have had men, 2 to 3 men, because that is who could be considered reliable witnesses in a court of law, in a Jewish court of law. Then we have, back in 1 Corinthians, Paul tells us of Christ appearing to over 500 brethren, and here's the key to that, most of which are still alive. So 1 Corinthians was written within 20 years of the resurrection. There's some that estimate as close as 5 to 10 years after the resurrection. So if he's writing this letter and it is getting sent out wide, and he says, yeah, Jesus came out to 500 guys and most of them are still alive, that's opening himself up to criticism of people saying, well, who are these people? Who was there? Calling him out. You know, even now you can't go out there and say, hey, 500 people saw me or saw this without somebody saying, well, who was it? Who were the 500 people? So he opened himself up to that criticism because he knew it was true. He was very clear those 500 people saw him. And then there were several more instances within the Bible where post-resurrection Jesus was seen, he was heard, he was ate with, and he was touched by disciples and other individuals. Again, several inadequate alternate theories about the resurrections, some very, I find, comical ones. If I get to come back and talk about some of the skeptics, then we'll talk about that evidence. We'll talk about why it doesn't line up. But now we're going to go to the third and fourth questions. I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between them. I do think they're intertwined. So the third and fourth questions: what do Buddhists and others say as to why Christianity is wrong? And what is the defense for Christianity being the only true religion? So I'm going to give you my 2 cents on this, and then we'll get into some facts. I heard it said years ago, ours is the only religion where our God died for us, and then he rose from the grave. Now, when I say our God died for us, I'm saying our God died for our sins and then rose from the grave. There's no other religion that has that. Ours is one of the only religions where works doesn't get us in. When you look at all the religions I'm going to go through later, it's about works. Works get you stature. They get you status. Ours isn't. I went to a church in Colorado for years, and every Easter he did the same thing. I thought it was cool. He would go through all the religions. He would, up on the big screen, he would, Muhammad and, Islam, Muhammad, when he died and where he was buried. And then he'd go Buddhist, and then he'd go through all the religions. And it would get to Jesus and when he died. And then it would say where he's buried, and it would say something like tomb is empty or something, and everybody would start cheering and they'd get all happy. But again, it is the only religion where that has happened. No other religion has their God coming down and dying for them, rising, and the tomb being empty. So I can't hit that home enough when people ask me, how do I know mine is the true religion? That's it. Because ours stands apart. Ours stands apart from all the other religions. So we're gonna, every time. I wrote even more pages this time. I shortened my intervals, and I was like, man, I got so much more, and I'm still looking at the time like,
You
dang.
gotta throw in more ums. If you throw in like 100 ums,
It really just slows it down.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're gonna run through a few of the larger, they're cults and religions. I'll leave you to decide which ones are the cults, but
All of them.
all of them. So Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, good
All right,
lord.
okay, and what we're gonna cult. What we're gonna look at is what their views on Jesus are, and there's a reason I'm doing this.
It's like Satan's brother.
So Jehovah's Witness.
J-Dub.
Jesus was not God.
Huh.
He was Michael the Archangel before he lived on earth.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
Holy crap, that's weird.
yeah. He returned in 1914 as a spirit. Him and the angels are soon going to destroy all non-Jehovah Witness. All right. The Mormons. He's a separate God from the Father. He's the spirit child of the father and mother in heaven. He was married. His death on the cross does not provide atonement, but it does provide everyone with resurrection. In Islam, Jesus is one of the most respected prophets of over 124,000 prophets. Jesus was sinless, a miracle worker, born of a virgin, but not the Son of God. Jesus is not God. He was not crucified. He will return for a special role before the special judgment day. And some say that is perhaps to turn all Christians to Islam. Judaism, he was either an extremist or a good but martyred Jewish rabbi. Some denominations, I guess, of Judaism kind of treat him as like, you don't talk about him, he was nothing. They don't believe he was the Messiah or that he rose from the dead. Hinduism believes Jesus was a teacher, a guru, or an avatar, an incarnation of Vishnu. And no, I read that and I was like, an avatar. And my kids love the movie, so I was like, that's all I could think of from then on was they think Jesus was a blue guy with a tail. He was not the Son of God. Death does not atone for sin. Did not rise from the dead. On a side note of Hinduism, Mahatma Gandhi, who was a leader within Hinduism, he was not the leader of Hinduism, but he was the leader within Hinduism, read the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, every single day. And he would wake up and that's what he would read every day. So again, there's Jesus in that religion. Buddhism, some believe he's an enlightened teacher, not largely recognized within Buddhism though. And so I tell you this because Jesus is recognized. Yes?
What happened in 1914?
I don't know. They so
It was like they said Jesus was coming back in 1940s, but then nothing happened.
No, that was
So they had to
1970,
say
I think.
It was a spiritual return.
So I didn't dig too far into it. That came out of the Rose Book of Bible charts and all that. And basically what they do is they line up all the religions and there's a category of Jesus, and I got to cheat and see. Like all of this was other people doing work. I just stole other people's work.
We love that.
But I cited him in the beginning. It's not plagiarism. But no, that's actually a good question. It just said that he returned in 1914 as a spirit.
Is that
I think Jason.
Yeah, like a lot of bad stuff happened right after.
I asked like Jason, and we were talking about like the Jehovah's Witness, and he said like everyone around that time who was Jehovah's Witness sold all their stuff, started like racking up their credit cards, be like, oh, Jesus is coming in like 2 days, so like let's just live it up until then. And they were all like waiting on their porches for him to come back, and then nothing happened.
It's spiritual.
Yeah. And then everyone's lives got fricked because they did all that. So.
The head credit card is wonderful.
So, a lot of the largest religions see Jesus. They have Jesus within their faith. Okay, whether it be a teacher, a prophet, or an avatar. Most of these large religions view Jesus as some sort of prophet or deity. All right. What you don't see in Christianity is you don't see us looking at Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad as deities or prophets. So there's people that'll say Christianity has stolen from other religions. I would personally argue the fact that our God is in all of their religions. It's kind of the other way around. That's just me. So we see him in other religions. You don't see their gods or prophets in our religion. And the final question, what do other faiths say? They're all going to say theirs is the true faith. All right? They're all going to say, most of them will tell you there are rules you have to follow in order to get into heaven, or that enlightenment, inner peace, whatever it is that faith is, their end goal is. They'll tell you that Jesus was a good teacher, a good prophet, good moral leader. And I'm going to keep going back to an avatar, just because I find that funny. But I offer you one piece. You heard Noah talk about it a while back. You've probably heard me talk about it. Jesus can't be just a good moral teacher. He can't be just a prophet or anything like that. He can't. He openly claimed to be the Son of God. He openly, he said he was, who he was. And so, he's one of three things. He was a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord. Alright? He was a liar because if he claimed to be God and was not, then he's a liar. If he claimed to be God, was not, but thought he was, he's a lunatic. Or he claimed to be God and he is, and he's the Lord. He's God. That's the only three routes. He can't be a good moral teacher, but he's not God. Because he claimed to be God. So a good moral teacher does not claim to be God if he's not God. So, to be clear, we can say he's a good moral teacher because we also believe he's God. But if you are trying to say, no, he was just a prophet, just a good moral teacher, your argument is invalid because of what Jesus said. He didn't leave, he left a lot of gray area where we have to step out in faith. He didn't leave gray area in that. He was very clear about who he was. So, once again, early.
Questions?
Who has questions on any of the evidence? Or anything? You get a lot of questions in these days.
So to start off,
Wow, he wrote down. He's got like a list.
yeah,
It's like,
The whole book.
this is my number one takeaway.
what is it? I can't.
Okay. So you talk about how women are not reliable witnesses. Whenever you're having like an argument with your wife, have you ever tried that practice before?
No, because God says they are. He made them his witnesses.
No, because Jesus made it very clear that they are reliable witnesses. Next question. No, don't. No, I would never. Like that is. So I did. She
Great way to
moved
sleep on the
back.
couch.
That's what really happened.
It's like a great way to sleep on the couch right there. If you want to pull that one out.
No, I did not say that. Or would never say that. he's taking notes on. No, do not say that. Anything else? Yes.
Earlier you said that Islam mentions that Jesus was, a virgin birth and that he was sinless and a really good prophet. If he was sinless, but he claimed to be God, wouldn't that be contradicted? Like, wouldn't that be blasphemous to claim you're God?
Yeah, it would, and that's where we go back to liar, Lord, lunatic. I don't know how they reconcile. Maybe I've never read the Quran or whatever holy books like Hinduism or Jehovah's Witness, Mormons. I've never read any of their holy books, so I have a very high level understanding. I don't know if they've taken. I'm guessing they've taken those deity claims out, or they just ignore those. I know if you the Jehovah's Witness, when they come knock on your door, you could tell them, hey, well, what about what he says here? They'll tell you, oh, well, our book doesn't have that. And so, this is what we believe, and it's like, okay, well, we're looking at two different books. So I do know that that's probably what it is they've taken those pieces out. So, does that answer how you...
He gives me more insight on questions that I have because I have like my dad's read the Quran before and I have like Islamic friends, so I have other people that dig deeper on this question.
Yeah, the two books are probably different. There's probably a lot of the same stuff. Going back to Gandhi reading the Sermon on the Mount, there's probably a lot of that stuff within the Quran if they're saying he's a good prophet or one of the best prophets. But where Jesus gets like, hey, I'm the Son of God, like they probably keep those pieces out. So I don't know enough to like speak authoritatively on that though, so I'm sorry. We can, if you want, I'll look it up.
I think most Muslims say like the gospel is corrupted, and they'll say like Jesus never actually claimed to be God. So kind of related to that, how would you respond to like Muslims, for example, who say like Jesus never claimed to be God? Like if you go to the Gospels, there's not one quote where it says I am God, which would be more implicit.
At that point, so what would I say to them if they tell me he doesn't? If he doesn't.
Like if he's not explicitly claiming to be God, it makes our religion
I mean, you look at. I'd have to actually sit down and like look at verses on that and pull the verses out where, he's ascending, sitting at the right hand of God. He's, wow.
He says if you've seen
If
me, you've seen the Father.
You've seen the Father. If you've, I'd have to go into Revelation on that because I'm pretty sure in Revelation he gets pretty explicit about who he is, doesn't he?
He says before Abraham was, I am, which is that's the
So
name
there's-
of God in the Old Testament.
he doesn't explicitly say I am God.
He says, I and the Father are one in John 10.
Yeah.
So he does say that. What they're going to come back with is what we were talking about. It's been corrupted. At some point, it's almost an agree to disagree sort of thing. Because I'll show you in my Bible where it says that. Or I'll show you in my Quran where it doesn't say that. So when it comes to debating religions, I have a hard time because I'm like, dude, it says it right there. Yeah, but, and it's like, no, come on, and I get frustrated. But I would say at that point it's almost an agree to disagree because if they're just going to stick to what they know, we're going to stick to what we know. that's why, again, I came at a different angle on this. Like, I went to outside evidence of his deity, of him being resurrected. Because a lot of people, if you go just to the Bible, they're going to try and discredit the Bible. Even though when we look at, I have to look up the bibliographical test of verification, when you look at that, and you compare it to how they look at other historical documents, you would think they would see the Bible, the Gospels and Acts, as historical biographies. But they're so against faith, and they're so dead set. And I would encourage you guys to read Case for Christ, because Lee Strobel's very open about how every time somebody would say, hey, well, here's the facts, he would like argue the facts. And if you don't want to read the book, watch the movie. It does a pretty good job. It's not as good.
What's it called?
Case for Christianity.
Case for Christianity.
And I'll get you in a second. There was one point where he was arguing the 500 witnesses, and this is in the movie. His coworker, who was a Christian, was like, if you had 500 witnesses for a story you're writing, are you going to dismiss that as mass hallucination, or are you going to accept that? And so, at some point, we know the Bible is truth. They don't know that yet. And so, we might have to take that other approach of being like, okay, here's the facts, and then get them to the Bible.
Well, I do wanna-
Not to answer your question.
Well, I kind of wanted to respond to that too, because one of the biggest things within the Bible, if somebody says in the Bible, Jesus never claims to be God. The thing is that the things that he was saying, like, well, he doesn't say, I am God. The things that he does say, I am the Father are one. I am, if you've seen the Father, you've me before. Abraham was, I am. Even if you're like, well, it doesn't say he's God explicitly, the way that the people reacted to what he was saying makes it very, very clear that they understood that he was claiming deity. He was claiming to be God, because otherwise the people wouldn't have flipped out and tried to stone him. If he wasn't being potentially heretical by saying, I am, you know what I mean, by saying these things, they would have been like, they wouldn't have had this big reaction. That's just another.
So,
another
yep.
thing.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Yep.
What's
Jason.
your morning routine like?
My morning routine. I get up at anywhere between 3:45 and 4 o'clock, and I stumble my way to the coffee maker, and I bought a Tesla so it can drive me to work. I drink my coffee. I listen to Monday mornings. I listen to the service I missed. Tuesdays, I usually listen to the Got Questions podcast from the week before. If I'm behind on my Bible readings, because I do Bible in a year, I'll listen to it on the drive. I will listen to Sean McDowell's podcast, or if another one, I have a bunch of different podcasts that if something pops up that's interesting to me. I do about, I'd say a solid 90 to 95% theological or Christian-based podcast. Occasionally, I'll let a Joe Rogan or something along those lines. If it really just grabbed my attention, I'll listen to that. But that is a very, very rare, because there's a lot of garbage on that. But that's my morning. And on the weekends, it's try to sleep as long as possible, and then whatever my family has. I read my Bible at night. Every night.
Right.
That's the last thing I do.
If you get up that early, how early do you go to bed?
Keep in mind, I got 2 little ones, so I go to bed when they go to bed. Try for about 8 o'clock. Usually by like 9:30, I'm in bed. Read my Bible. I've been reading Chronicles of Narnia, all the different books.
Wrong order though.
Huh?
That's not bad.
No, it's not in the Bible.
Reading them in the wrong order though.
I read the Bible and then I read that. I read every day. I love reading. But usually by about 9:30, I'm putting everything down and going to sleep. So. I see a hand over here? No?
Okay.
Alright. As usual, slay the day away. Appreciate that, whoever put it. As per usual, we're a few minutes early, so if you go outside, please do be quiet.
Oh, yeah, well, they do need to go outside.
Yeah, you're going outside, you're not horse playing in here. I'm not picking on anybody or saying anybody, but you're not horse playing in here. Let me pray for us real quick. Father, just thank you for this opportunity to come together, and we ask that as we go about our week, that we just continue to focus on you, and as life's challenges come in, we are continually reminded to look to you, to focus on you, Lord. And we ask for your blessing over the VBS this week, and all of the staff and volunteers and kids that come here. We ask that it is focused on you, it is centered on you, and it does nothing but glorify you, Lord. We ask as we go about our week, you keep everybody safe, and you bring us all back next weekend. In Jesus' name, amen.